So today we're speaking with Reverend Ann Kansfield, the first in our series of guest profiles in the Chaplaincy Innovation Labs program called This is What a Chaplain Looks Like. I'm Steve Dahl, and my guest today is Reverend Ann Kansfield. Ann, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Excellent. So should I refer to you as Ann or Reverend Ann or?
Honestly, for me personally, Ann is just fine. For others, what I'm realizing though is that people sometimes want a title to work with, and so often, especially within the fire department, I'll just suggest Chaplain Kansfield. If you were a member of my congregation, I would say Pastor Ann, but really just don't call me late for dinner. Is
All right, Chaplain Ann, Reverend Kansfield, Chaplain Kansfield.
I'll
probably forget.
It, right?
Well, hey, let's start just big picture. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm bivocational. I serve a wonderful congregation in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, the Greenpoint Reformed Church. I've been there for 17 years now. And then I have served for the last 5.5 years as the chaplain for the fire department in the city of New York.
Wow. So let's look at this a little bit deeper then. What made you decide to become a chaplain?
So when I finished college, I, like many of my fellow graduates, I went to work on Wall Street. I was a stockbroker. And then 9/11 happened. And that was a really profound moment for me in my life. I just had a lot of time on my hands in the ensuing weeks. And in that time realized I really, really wanted to go to seminary and to answer a call to ministry. It was also during that time that I learned about the life and ministry of Father Michael Judge, who was a fire department, very beloved fire department chaplain in New York, who died on 9/11. And my grandfather was a firefighter, my cousin's a firefighter. And when I heard about Michael, who is just an inspirational guy, yeah. I highly commend any biography about him, any movie, find out everything you can about him. That is my dream job. And I never actually thought I would be able to get the job because there are not that many chaplains in the fire department. And people who become fire department chaplains tend not to retire or leave to go elsewhere. That it's a job that people tend to start and then last for a very long time.
That's your life.
It's a good life. It's an excellent life.
It's like your life purpose, isn't it?
And it really matches the culture of the fire department itself. I mean, in a lifestyle where people tend to switch jobs pretty quickly and move on in the context of the fire department, people stay for a lifetime.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of surprising that you're coming from the world of the crazy stock market as a broker into this spiritual world of chaplaincy. What was that transition like?
It might
why?
Make sense. Well, it makes perfect sense in my mixed up brain for sure. I enjoyed the high stakes pressure environment of Wall Street. It was one of those things where there wasn't a lot of gray area. The market either goes up or it goes down. And in the fire department, I joke that we have two speeds. We have fire, we have not fire. And when it's an emergency, it's really highly focused. It's all hands on deck. I believe the folks who are into meditation talk about an experience of flow. And that's really what happens. You get in the zone, you're in the zone, and then you wait and you prepare for the next time that you are called out. And from everything I've heard, both environments are really great for people who have ADHD. And fancy that, so do I.
So given that, what is one thing that people would be surprised to hear about you, or that they wouldn't expect, besides being a stockbroker in the past?
Oh, well, I tithe. I'm a tither.
That's good. Full 10%?
Yeah, full 10%. And I would do more, when I can, because it just feels so good. So I don't know if that would be surprising to other people. It's kind of surprising to me because I'm also incredibly cheap.
Well, you were a stockbroker, so you knew a lot about money coming into this game,
right? And I don't think I was originally a tither. I think it was more like I experienced it, and it felt good.
So what gives you meaning in that world of that fire department environment?
I mean, clearly, it makes a difference to have a shared mission that is pretty easy to say. Mm-hmm. In a world where you can easily get off the track, we protect life and property in the city of New York. Yeah. And my job is to serve the members of the fire department, which was actually a really helpful piece to know for me, because in the world of ministry, your work is never done. You could easily feel like you're obliged to serve everyone and everything. And so I am really grateful to have, to operate in an environment where there are some relatively clear lanes about what we do and what we don't do. And I also really like the fact that that we're a team, so that we accomplish things, certainly in theory, but we accomplish bigger things together than we do ever as individuals, and we have each other's backs, so we're able to do bigger, braver things.
Was there anything in your career, Reverend Ann, that really stood out as something you will carry with you as a high impact event forever?
So it's a good question, because it could sound like there's one huge event that's going to be sort of the capstone. And instead, I think, at least thus far, my ministry has been one where it's a series of very significant events, none of which might seem huge on the outside, but which are, each one is particularly significant and acts as a reminder that I'm not just living out my calling in a void. I think it's pretty easy. Often when things are difficult, like I just want to paint a wall because it can go from one color to another and I can see the change. It's very easy to think like, oh, I really don't make a difference. And I find that just when I start painting walls, something happens that's a reminder of like, oh, right, this is really significant work. This is really important work. This is valuable work. But it's not necessarily the stories that I would have that were the most meaningful to me. What might sound pretty bland, I think, to many others. And the ones that I think that would sound like super exciting to others are like, oh yeah. Ho-hum. I'm sure that if we think a lot, every pastor, or in my opinion, every preacher, or every pastor or preacher has one sermon that they're just basically preaching over and over again. Sure. And mine is basically, we joke, it's called the detective of grace, that basically you have to look and be a detective to see where God is at work. And that isn't always easy. And so when you're working on organizational change, organizational health, often you really have to look a bit hard to see the changes and be a bit of a detective of God's grace.
It's kind of like when I'm watching the 6 o'clock news, I always look for, who do I really need to send my prayers to? Otherwise, why would I watch?
Right, and sometimes you're like, oh, does it really matter? Well, yes, actually, it really does. Mm-hmm. So I would say, I mean, recently I was called out to a particularly tragic call that involved a very young child, and that incident for me personally was really difficult because it turned out that there were social circles that overlapped, and that I actually knew, just one step removed from the family, which was really hard. But then the following week, just through happenstance, it might seem, another person who was on that call who was really, really struggling was suggested, like, hey, you should get in touch with me, not knowing that I had been on the call, also on that call. And what was, I think, so meaningful was that it was really a mutual ministry, that we both needed each other. And that's a very different type of chaplaining, I think, than often what happens in a hospital setting. Because while I kind of joke that I serve a mega church of people, there are 14,000 members in the fire department. But we are really like an old school congregation where there are, generations of people and nobody's leaving, and we are going to be around one another and see one another throughout the rest of our lives, so that I get to have meaningful relationships that are long lasting.
And they will change and evolve over time.
And they evolve over time. Yeah. Many of them are not. I would say a lot of what I spend my time doing in terms of interacting with people are sort of the equivalent of short water cooler conversations, that are basically sprinkling the seeds on the ground in case something bad happens, and they might remember, oh, there's a chaplain. And that's exactly what happened the other week. The chief on the scene said, hey, we have this chaplain that would be a good idea. Let's go and call out a chaplain, which I think is really what the Innovation Lab is doing too. They're putting out the seeds. This is what we do. This is how we function. These are some of the benefits that we bring, and seeing where they land and how we can grow together. Yeah. Often I could easily, if I would look on the outside in, I could look at my life and be like, what do you actually do? Are you doing anything? And like, what actually is your job? I've sort of come to the conclusion in many ways, I get to function sort of like the mascot, the one where if there is a bad event, I go. Many people, I have been told, think, they look to the chaplain for a sense of hope. Mm-hmm. They look to the chaplain as the one who's praying for them, who's cheering them on, who they don't have to be afraid is going to tell their boss or tell anybody anything about what's going on, but who's really there just to cheer them on and to root for them and to pray for them and to be by their side, to show up and to be there, which is exactly what Michael was doing at the World Trade Center. And the number of people who come and share stories about his life and his ministry and talk about the impact that he had showing up as a way of saying, I am here as a representative of God. God is here. Things might look dire, but God's grace is sufficient. God's love is sufficient, and you're sufficient.
But let me ask you this, because my perception of being the minister or a pastor of a church, that appears to be a stressful job to me. You've added this environment of the fire department to your list of job responsibilities. You have two major entities you're supporting. How do you conduct self-care in that kind of situation?
Good question. I heard a really great observation that we're all so busy, we're all tired, we're all exhausted, stressed, whatever, that the antidote for that isn't necessarily doing nothing, but rather it's wholehearted living, which means being your most authentic self. It means, if you Google wholehearted living, there's a great like 10 points that Brene Brown has on it that I've been really working through in my own life as a means of self-care. Mm-hmm. And that I have discovered that when one environment is that I could tilt into being a little bit crotchety and cranky about, that the other really is the antidote for that moment. One of the things that fire department chaplains right now are really dealing with is that we have so many members who are sick and are dying of cancers related to the World Trade Center. Oh, wow. And I remember one week in particular, I think we had 3 or 4 funerals right in a row. And I drove back from one visitation. I visited a woman who was actively dying. And then it was late in the evening. And I thought, I'm just going to swing by the church because we run a soup kitchen, and I just want to go and see everybody, and also I could probably get a free meal, So I stopped by, and it was so great. I park in front of the church. I walk into the gates, which are relatively narrow. These wrought iron gates that are in front of the church. It's a very small building, and this older, very alcoholic Polish man, it's a very Polish neighborhood, so with minimal English, puts his arms around me and gives me this great big hug, unannounced, anything. And it was like, wow, how did you know that what I actually needed was a big giant hug, and amid vodka cologne, and it really was perfect. And it goes both ways. That when church is complicated, or there's conflict happening, or I'm just feeling stymied, that it is almost as if some folks at the fire department can tell, or maybe it's the leading of the divine, but it fills in the gaps. Yeah. I will say for any pastor who's trying to be bivocational, it really helps if you can bring your congregation along so that they feel like they're a part of the ministry that you're also doing. Sure. Because, I could easily see, and one of my biggest fears is that my congregation is going to get jealous or say, like, what the heck? You're supposed to be our pastor, and you're out there, like, playing fire department games.
Divided time,
right. And I know that should that day ever come, I'll be like, but they do pay for my health care.
Right.
But eventually even that might not do. Yeah. And so I've really tried to be intentional about when there's extra time in the fire department time to spend it with my congregation, and to prepare them along the way so that I know that it's working when something will happen and they see it on TV and they're like, oh yeah, I thought you might be there. Yeah. That when they see the fire department in action, that they think, oh yeah, we're supporting that ministry. That's us. Even and it's been a really great crossover for our congregation too.
My guess is you bring some fun and levity to the world of spiritual care. Is that true?
I try. I try.
I sense a little.
People enjoy.
I sense a little mischief in this world of yours.
Well, it is true. Perhaps the fire department aids that. There's nothing like some downtime for a little bit of chop busting and prank making, and I think that when you see the most difficult and tragic and sad things in life, that you could either become really depressed, or you can really You can really say like carpe diem. I was going to say grab the day by the balls, but I don't think that that's good. You'll probably have to edit that down. But like you can really grab the day by the day, right? Like
we're leaving that in. I like that. Okay, so let me ask you this. So given the craziness of our world as we see it, what advice do you have for some young person who's thinking about going into the world of spiritual care or becoming a chaplain?
I had this great advice from a Catholic priest who passed it on when I was in seminary. And he said, you know, they're not going to pay us well in ministry, but that's because we get paid in stories. And so if you want to get paid in stories and live a life that's fully alive and know that your life has meaning, and that not a day goes by where you can't actually make a difference. I mean, I think that's what actually happened on 9/11 was that week I felt so useless. Like there was nothing that I could do that mattered. Like my life was really useless, and I never wanted to feel that sense of uselessness again. That if I was going to be alive, I wanted to be useful, and having a life in ministry and spiritual care, you are incredibly useful, and you get paid in really great stories.
Very, very well said. You'll be writing a book soon, I'm sure.
Oh, I have written a book.
Oh.
And
the title is?
The name is, hang on, you'll have to edit it in. It is,
We're not editing anything. We're leaving all the...
Oh, right, one cut, that's me. Be the Brave One, Living Your Spiritual Values Out Loud and Other Life Lessons. And I believe it's available for pre-order wherever you purchase your books.
Do you have it in front of you?
No, I have a little sticky with the name of the title on it.
Well, send me a copy of the cover when you get it done.
I will. It was due just as the pandemic was rolling in. And there was no way
the pandemic
get it done. And so I had to explain to the editor that, you know, the pandemic was really impacting churches. It was really impacting emergency food delivery programs, and it was really impacting the fire department.
All right.
So,
Reverend Ann Kansfield, we need to wrap up, but let me ask you one final question. What inspires you? What drives you? What keeps you going in these challenging times?
Oh, I think the ability to serve such amazing, wonderful people. Not a day goes by that I don't give thanks that I get to go and interact, even if it's virtually, even if it's like stymied and not the way it has previously been, but that, I get to just serve really delightful, wonderful people who are fully alive and working hard at being human.
Well, I think when we think of the words delightful and wonderful, your face is going to show up in my mind from now on. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, if that's the case, I will have done my job.
You have. And I'm looking forward to reading your book.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.